If orphans were a country, they would be the 8th largest country in the world.
He should have been a statistic. He should have been dead. And he was on that path, and that social worker believed in him. And he has since graduated from NYU. He was an intern in Congress. Basically, a male that exits the foster care system that doesn't get permanent has an 85% chance of being in jail, homeless, or dead by the time they're 19 and a half years old. The average girl that exits foster care has 2 children by the age of 21 on social services there as well.
All you have to do is impact one person, literally one person, because that person gets such a benefit. It is such a circle of, it just ripples out from there. You help one person, they got a leg up, or if you meant something to them at that moment in their life, they help somebody else, Your impact is astounding just by helping one person.
You're listening to the Retail Razor Show, where your expert hosts and their guests cut through the clutter in retail and retail tech.
Welcome to Season 5, Episode 9 of the Retail Razor Show, the only retail podcast in the top 10 all-time indie management podcast charts on Good Pods, and the highest ranked retail podcast in the top 100 indie marketing podcast charts on Good Pods. I'm Ricardo Belmar.
And I'm Casey Golden. Welcome, Retail Razor fans, to Retail's favorite podcast, where we cut through the clutter to give you sharp insights on what's happening in retail today, tomorrow, and where we'll get real about what's driving the future of retail.
Speaking of driving the future of retail, we have something very different today than our usual episode, Casey, don't we?
Yes, we do. Instead of bringing in another incredible interview, and really, we've just had a string of fantastic discussions this season, haven't we?
Yes, we have. Absolutely amazing people.
So this episode is a bit of a break from that, but an important one, because we're talking about how retail gives back to the community, how retail shows up to help children in need.
That's right. We're, of course, talking about the Retail ROI organization, which we have supported many times in the past on the show and with our own time and resources. And since we're approaching Q4 now, that means most people in retail are starting to make their plans for the NRF Big Show in January. And as we've said on the show before, the most important event during NRF week is the Super Saturday event that RetailROI brings to life every year at NRF.
So we thought it would be very helpful if we brought back our season 3 episode 16, where we had Greg Buzek, the president of Retail ROI, and Vicky Cantrell, board member of Retail ROI, and whom we just had on the show joining us in the Retail Transformers, come back to tell us about Retail ROI's 15th anniversary Super Saturday that was coming up for that year. Today, we're replaying that episode where we will learn all about what Retail ROI does to support and help children in need around the world, helping orphans, foster children, and so much more. We also learn Retail ROI's origin story. Just keep in mind that you'll be hearing about the past 2 Super Saturday events when you hear everyone talk about speakers and special activities. And part of the replay goes back to our original Clubhouse sessions where we first talked about Retail ROI.
That's right. So we'll have to bring Greg and Vicky back again to hear about what's coming on the agenda for 2026. So our hope with this episode is that you not only give it a listen, but also consider registering for the Super Saturday event. If you're a retailer, it's completely free to attend. If you've never attended before, there's absolutely no financial ask of you for being there. In fact, just by attending, your presence is helping to drive sponsorship of the event, which in turn is actually what raises the funding that the charity uses to work with other charities on the ground all over the world. Truly, just by attending, you are making a difference. 250 children will be able to get clean water. 200 children will get education funded for a year. 250 children will get life skills training. 250 children will get computer skills training. And just to give you an idea of the level of impact that you can have, again, just by being there, just by attending.
And if you're not a retailer, maybe you're a tech solution provider, system integrator, or really anyone serving the retail industry on the vendor supplier side. You can also help by becoming a sponsor of the event. CINT, I'm happy to say, has signed up to be a sponsor this year. Remember, it's the sponsorship funds that are raised at this event that fuel the spending power of Retail ROI for the new year, 2026, to help all of these children in need.
And for the fourth consecutive year, Super Saturday will be hosted by Microsoft at their Times Square office. And happy to see that support continuing each year. You can find more info on how to sponsor and how to register to attend at retailroi.org/Super Saturday. We'll put that info and links in the show notes as well.
So before we jump into the replay, just one last reminder to everyone listening and watching. If you like this episode and the show, please give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Good Pods. It really helps us know we're doing something right for the retail industry and for you, our listeners and viewers.
And if you are watching us on YouTube right now, hit that bell, click subscribe, so you're always up to date on each new episode across the entire Retail Razor podcast network of shows. We thank you for showing us so much support.
So with that, let's go right into the replay with our special edition, Taylor's Edition, episode celebrating Retail ROI with Greg Buzak, Vicki Cantrell, a good friend of the show, Jeff Roster, to hear why we are Retail ROI champions.
Well, I'm so happy to have with us today Greg Buzak and Vicki Cantrell, two great friends and fellow top retail influencers. Great to have you with us today, Greg and Vicki.
Well, it's great to be with you guys.
Hi, Ricardo. Hi, Casey. Lovely to see you guys.
We've been looking forward to having you both on the show again to talk about all the incredible things that you've been accomplishing with Retail ROI since we last had you here, and also hear about what do you have in store for us. In the replay, our listeners will hear all about the history of Retail ROI, but this year is a special anniversary, isn't it?
Our 15th.
Wow.
Our 15th Super Saturday.
15th.
So,
Hard
amazing.
to believe. I remember the very first one.
yeah.
Yeah.
We started,
Yeah.
we had our first discussion the day the Lehman Brothers went under. And our first Super Saturday was in January of 2010.
Wow. So here we are, 15 Super Saturdays later coming up. So can you tell us a little bit more about what's planned for this special 15th Super Saturday event?
Sure. Yeah. We're bringing things home. So we've been blessed with helping, I think, over 325,000 kids by partnering with great charities through Super Saturday over these 15 years. This year, we're bringing it back home. In the United States, foster children are the most vulnerable kids that we have in our society, and that we have a system that's incredibly broken. And at the core of that, and the most impactful aspect of that, is our social workers that work with children in the foster care system. In fact, data shows that children who have one social worker find permanence over 74% of the time. However, if there's any turnover of those social workers, that drops to under 18% of the time, and with devastating impacts. Basically, a male that exits the foster care system that doesn't get permanent has an 85% chance of being in jail, homeless, or dead by the time they're 19 and a half years old. The average girl that exits foster care has 2 children by the age of 21 on social services there as well. In fact, when you poll prison inmates today, 25% of our prison inmates spent time in foster care at one point in time. And it's about the breakup of the families. And our focus this year is on impacting that. One of our partners came up with a program that saw a 73% drop in social worker turnover in 1 year. And we are working to bring that nationally through what we're doing with Super Saturday to empower the skills and the people in our industry to make a difference and to help elevate the role in the view of the minds of people of what social workers do and how impactful they are.
Those are just amazing statistics. And I know it's not the first time I've heard you go through this, but I'm always, every time I hear those numbers, I'm just shocked at what an impact that can make.
Yeah, quite surprising.
It's
You know,
just stunning. So
it's what makes such a difference. And when we look back over the years and over the charities, you know that all the work that we do, all the trips that we take, all the impact that we have is by partnering and going alongside people in country, or, finding ways to not only go alongside great partners, but also to go back up the chain and figure out where the problem is and see if you can have an impact before somebody becomes an orphan or has another issue to deal with. And I think this year, and what Greg just talked about, and why we're so passionate about it, is we've gone back up the chain to try to stop or impact something from happening in the first place. And the numbers are so compelling. It's going to make people feel so good to be part of this movement. People are always looking to make an impact. How do I make a difference? How do I get involved? How do I give back? I think that they're just going to feel it and know it, that they have stopped something bad from happening. And I think that's a really important message this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that we always talk about is how retailers support what Retail ROI does. So for our retailers that are listening to this episode, what would you say is the best way for them to get involved, support what ROI is doing, join Super Saturday? What should they do?
Well, in a nutshell, our ask of retailers is just show up and be there. Be there for the content, be there for the networking. We make all of our money through sponsorships from the vendors. It is the most unique day you will ever see in a retail conference. You guys can attest to it, so it's not just my words there, but you show up that day, you attend the networking meetings, you listen to the content on AI and the state of the store and great emotional speakers, and just be there. That's the biggest thing. You'll help 250 children by just being there. You being there helps us raise the funds that we need to do this work. And that's our ask. Just show up.
And I would say, look, let's be honest. Let's talk about that. We're saying just be there. And the reason we want you there is because the sponsors give us money. Okay. And we know this industry and we know how it works, and sponsors will say what retailers will be there, but also understand that what that day is like. I always talk about partnership. The day is so impactful. What Greg just said about what you're going to hear. First of all, great content. Okay. From your peers and colleagues, great impact content. And then we'll talk about our special keynote speaker. But don't think that your presence there helps us get sponsorship, but don't think that this is a situation where you are going to be bombarded. These are people that come to this event that have a heart for all the work that we do. And these are good, amazing friends and colleagues in this industry, regardless of which side of the table you sit on. This is not a hard sell event. It's just a wonderful networking partner event and just being in the room with like-minded people.
This is the only fundraiser you'll ever go to where there is no financial ask of you personally. There's absolutely none there other than you participating in the day and talking to people.
That's very true.
So speaking of partners, how can our listeners that are also retail technology providers become a sponsor?
That's easy. It's easy to do. You just go right to the website, retailroi.org, and right on, obviously we're featuring Super Saturday now, so you can get to it right from the homepage or through events and clicking on Super Saturday, and you'll see the link for sponsorship opportunities. I will say that we are running up against a deadline, and so we only have about 2 weeks. December 15th is the deadline for all of us to understand who's going to be in the room and how we can execute on what you need. And, retailroi.org, homepage, sponsorship opportunities.
Perfect. Greg, Vicky, thank you so much for being with us today. These updates on Retail ROI and Super Saturday, I can't tell you how important it is to just be able to make sure everybody's getting involved. You know, our retail crew and families and listeners, we're all connected. We have all been, working together on so many things. So I just think that this is just imperative that we also get together to do something just wonderful. We want to ask all of our listeners and viewers to please reach out to any of us to learn more about how you can help raise awareness and gain support for Super Saturday.
Yeah, and especially after having heard how much impact there is for each and every retailer that just shows up, just as Greg said, just for showing up at Super Saturday, what impact that can have and how many kids you can help just by being there, because that directly translates into the funding and support from sponsors. And Greg, I guess we should real quick mention of who's the special speaker that you have
this year. This year for our keynote, we have the one and only Darryl McDaniels of Run DMC, who spent time in the foster system himself. He is going to be with us to share his story and motivate us that day. You'll be up close and personal, and it might get a little tricky. Who knows?
That's going to be exciting. It's going to be exciting, I think, and pretty emotional at the same time, which, if we haven't said it enough, that's probably the hallmark of this event, right? Is how the combination of the technical thought leadership you'll hear, the networking, and just the emotional exchange that'll happen from hearing about all these incredible stories of how children are being helped through what Retail ROI does. So I guess one more time, Greg, for the retailers in the audience, how do they register?
Just the same places you find the sponsorships there. It's just retailroi.org, and you'll see a registration link, and that's it.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much, Greg. Thank you, Vicky. Both of you, thanks so much for sharing a little bit of insights on what's coming up for this 15th anniversary Super Saturday coming up. I can't wait to be there and to see everybody in person and to hear all these amazing emotional stories we're going to hear.
And thank you guys for always taking, for being such champions and helping us get the message out and getting the message out yourselves, and doing all that you can with all of your resources and your reach to really push this. You guys are amazing advocates, and we really appreciate it.
Now let's dive into our special replay. Think of it as Taylor's version, because it's Taylor's world and we're all just living in it. Our replay of the celebration of Retail ROI episode with Greg Buzak, Vicky Cantrell, and Jeff Roster.
Welcome, everybody, to another session in the Retail Razor Club room. We've got a special one today where we're doing a celebration of one of what I feel is one of the most important organizations in retail today, and that's Retail ROI. And some of you in the audience are very familiar with Retail ROI and what it's accomplished and what it's done in the past, and maybe others in the audience might not be quite as familiar. You'll get to learn quite a bit about it through the course of today's session. We've got a couple of special guests with us today, Greg Buzak and Vicky Cantrell, who I probably can't think of anyone else who can do a better job of telling us everything there is to know about Retail ROI. And as I say that, I'm sure Jeff is ready to jump in and raise his hand as well, being the person that introduced me to Retail ROI many years ago. So with that, why don't I ask Greg and Vicky to give a brief introduction to yourselves. Vicky, why don't you go first?
Hi, everybody. Great to be here on a Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock. I won't give Ricardo any grief because everybody does. But this is a topic that's worth a Friday at 5 o'clock. And I've been involved with Retail ROI since the beginning, and I'm pleased to be working alongside Greg and Randy to figure out how we increase our help and how we make a great experience and divide the money and make the biggest impact. So I started 12 years. Are we 11 years? And have many great experiences, not only traveling myself to various countries, but also taking both my children there. And the impact has been on our life and our hearts pretty impactful. And happy to tell you more about it. I've been in retail forever and ever in all sides of retail. So I guess that's how I got involved, because it's my fellow cohorts in retail that brought this to bear. Greg?
And I'm Greg Busick. I guess my day job, or my first day job, is being president of IHL Group. We're a retail analyst firm. Gosh, this started because I had started a orphan care ministry at our church, and we were at Oracle Open World, and it was the day that Lehman Brothers went under, September 15th of 2008. And Paul Singer of Super Value and previously with Target was there, and I knew he was an adoption advocate. So we had a meeting and said, hey, maybe we could do something in the industry. And we could call it, at that time, there was a lot of mergers and acquisitions and everything was focused on efficiency. And we'll call it ROI, a play on words, which ends up being the world's geekiest name for a charity, Retail ROI. And then we just said, we call it the Retail Orphan Initiative. And that's how we get our acronym there. And that day, with the help of Rose Spicer from Oracle, Paul Singer basically did his open world presentation, about 10 minutes on target and the rest on adoption. And we were all astounded. And we came out of that meeting and said, let's do something together. And I know Jeff was there, Rose was there, Kathy Hotka, Mark Milstein, and I think Kathy Martyr were there. And we said, yeah, let's do something together. Instead of just competing with each other, we all know each other. We see each other all the time. It'd be fun to do something together in the industry. So that's the start of Retail ROI. And we had everybody assume that Paul would be the guy to lead it. Paul had been the guy that took over for Dave Thomas of Wendy's, lobbying Congress for funds for foster kids and adoption. In fact, he has started a group called the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute that he helped fund initially. That is the only thing in Washington that has over 350 members of Congress, I think, in total, that are on the caucus together and agree on something. Paul was a giant for that. So we all assumed he would run it. There were three of us, myself, Paul, and Mark, that put up the initial seed money to get started. And we signed the paperwork. And 3 days after we signed the paperwork, Paul called me and said, Greg, I just got a call from the neurosurgeon. I have a tumor and I have to have surgery next Monday. And unfortunately, Paul, when he had surgery, never regained the ability to speak clearly and reason and stuff. So it kind of fell to me to take the leadership role for Retail ROI. So that's how we started in 2008.
Thanks for the quick description for that, Greg. Jeff, you've got a pretty long history with Retail ROI as well. Why don't you give a quick introduction?
Hi, Jeff Roster. Let's see, what am I? Co-host of, I guess, This Week in Innovation on some advisory boards. And try to keep Ricardo out of trouble at the Center for Retail Transformation, which we're both doing a very poor job at. So lots of trouble coming down the road.
We're working on that. So Greg, Vicky, let me ask you maybe a couple of questions. So with that history that Greg just gave on how things started with Retail ROI, give us a quick overview on how Retail ROI works. I always describe this to everyone as a charity group that's basically built by the retail industry, run by people in the retail industry, and that it works with other charities to do a lot of great work around the world, helping children in need, whether it's orphan children's foster care.
Sure. Yeah. Just to begin with, the first step we had to make is we needed to raise, hey, we got a charity, we got to raise money. So we said, how do we raise money? And we looked around the room and said, gosh, we know events. We know who all the best speakers are. And let's put on an event aligned with the timing of the NRF show. We'll call it Super Saturday. And we'll invite all the retailers to come for free. And we'll charge vendors that want to sell to retailers a fee, a sponsorship fee to get access. So we just basically said ladies' night at a bar, so to speak, was the approach. And that became our fundraiser. In terms of the initial charities that we did, the first initial charities were people that I had already started working with through some other experience. And then after that, it started to blossom as other people got involved. And so we have really three criteria when it comes to working with charities. Obviously, it's got to be a 501c3 based in the United States. They're involved with vulnerable children, orphan foster care, clean water, something to do with vulnerable children in some manner. Number two, it can't be a church or a synagogue or a faith. It's got to be a separate entity altogether. So it can have a faith-based component to it, but it's not something that's part of a community of faith in and of itself. And then the third piece of it is somebody in the industry has to be personally involved in the charity themselves and vouch for the integrity of that charity. And then we start really small with grants as low as $5,000. And we go up from there. We present that back to the board with the results, and then we grow from there. So in total, I think we've teamed up with over 55 charities to date with different variety of grants. And they work in 27 different countries.
Thanks for that overview, Greg. I want to read some stats that you've given me before to kind of set the stage a bit for everyone here on what some of the accomplishments are. And to let everyone know, we recently at Microsoft had a special giving event held to try to raise some funds for Retail ROI. And Greg and Vicky were kind enough to join that session. And Greg presented a little bit of background for the employees that were attending that event. And I just want to read some of those and see if anybody on the stage has some reactions and wants to share some other info from that. So the one that kind of grabbed me a lot that you mentioned, Greg, was if orphans were a country, they would be the 8th largest country in the world. And the other one was that for foster kids that age out of the U.S. system within 18 months, 85% of the boys are homeless or in prison, and over 70% of the girls are pregnant, homeless, or in prison. Those stats are just astounding to me. And I'd never, had thought about just how significant this really is.
Yeah, it's a huge issue, and that's part of our role. We see our role as 3 parts. One's the knowledge of this problem that you just outlined. 2 is leveraging our skill sets, our networks, who we know, what we know, to make a difference and come alongside different organizations that are doing great work where we can double, triple, or quadruple the impact. And then 3rd is funding for projects. So you just gave some of the core stats out there for things.
Yeah, and then I want to go ahead and share some of the accomplishment stats that you shared with me before. So this is since 2010, RetailROI has funded over 206 projects in 27 countries, installed 26 computer labs. I think those were all in schools, correct?
Schools, yeah.
Yep.
Well, there's been a couple that have been like in after-school programs.
Oh, okay.
As well. So.
Okay. Yep. And then also on the list of what you had provided before, built or remodeled 21 school buildings or homes and helped rescue over 1,400 women and children from sex trafficking through border monitoring, helped support over 1,500 adoptions, and built 14 wells and clean water projects. I think overall you calculated and estimated that over 252,000 children have been helped by the people of Retail ROI since 2010, which I think is an amazing accomplishment worth celebrating.
Yeah. And to be perfectly transparent, it's our charity partners that have done this work. We've kind of played matchmaker at times and lended some funding for things, but it's the real benefits of Retail ROI is when we take really successful people in the retail industry and connect them with these charities and then let them go. Just make the introduction. Turn the light bulb on. If I can turn the light bulb on and just point people in the right direction, amazing things happen. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah, can you give us some examples of those?
So this makes it all clear. So we had a need in Honduras. We had a school of 650 kids that literally they had enough money to feed the kids or to pay the teachers. They couldn't do both. So they reached out to us and we said, well, what do you need? He says, well, we need corn because we make 4,300 tortillas a day by hand there to feed the kids. And so we looked at it and said, well, where can we get corn? And we said, who's the biggest buyer of corn? Well, it happened to be Cargill. So we placed a call to Cargill. Cargill ended up donating the 2 containers of corn. There was only one problem. It came in individual pieces. They were literally, comes out of the grain silo into the train car, and that's how they deliver it. Well, we needed to figure out how to get it to Honduras in some sort of package. So somebody at Cargill then took it upon themselves and said, you know what? I know somebody that's got a seed packing plant. Let me call them and see if they're willing to pack it for us. And so they did. They agreed. Fisher Seeds agreed to pack it into 50-pound bags. And then there was another lady who does shipping and logistics for a living. She ships containers all over the world every day. She came on board and she scheduled the FDA inspection, the shipping, and we had a year's supply of food delivered for $7,500 for 650 people. That's just one example of a project that was there.
Ricardo, that's a That's a great one that Greg talks about. But when we talk about bringing retailers or bringing people in the industry alongside these charities, it could be in any number of ways. And it's largely based on, as his example shows, what's already in their sweet spot, how they're job every day, and just suddenly applying what they do every day to a new situation. We had a guy, Bob Moncrief, who developed an entire curriculum around kind of how kids could build their business. And what we, when Greg talked about that, we go alongside our charity partners. These are people that are on the ground and understand how to, get things where they need to be. But they also, what we're trying to do is give these charities or people we work with the ability to sustain themselves, whether it be growing crops or whatever. And so this was a situation where these kids, when they graduate, they needed to have a skill, start a business, go to college, etc. And so he developed an entire curriculum. I think he was with Accenture at the time, Greg.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had this startup Shark Tank competition where we, on our trip to Honduras, Jeff, me, Lori Mitchell-Keller, several other heavy hitters in the industry were able to judge these and listen to their pitch as is after they had been through the whole curriculum. So I guess,
Wow.
It really is, and that has continued every year and has now expanded into Jamaica.
Jamaica, South Africa, Haiti.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 4 different countries that's gone. In fact, just recently in Jamaica, Parker Avery Group, to shout out to them, they've taken it to a whole new level with the entrepreneurial program. And we had 6 students go through an 8-week course. And I'm telling you, the winning presentation there, I've seen 40-year-old MBAs not do as well as this 18-year-old did. In sharing their vision for the cosmetics business they wanted to create. Basically, it's a cosmetics for African or dark-skinned people that have acne. And how do you provide cosmetics that heals the skin as well as provides beauty and makeup on top of it? And it was just fabulous. And Parker Avery invested, I think it was close to $6,000 US into seed funding to help get that launched there as a result. So it's really special when, like I said, when we can get people connected and go. And there's so many examples of it. Sometimes it's just funding. So like in the country of Liberia, the heart over there was, hey, you got 85% unemployment. So you've got kids in schools. We need to get them job skills. Well, one of the great things that happened is we started funding a vocational training program there in both construction, computer learning. We had interior design, cosmetology. And this week we got notice that 54 kids graduated from those programs.
Wow.
And have the opportunity to jobs. But here's where it's really exciting. Through the funding of Intel and HP, we built a school there. We paid for a school to be built. It cost about $35,000 for a K through 6 school. The kids in the construction, supervised by the engineers over there that were teaching them, they built their duplicate of that school for middle school for $10,000.
Wow.
As a result of that. And they learned along the way. And they've since built a dorm for the girls' side. And so that's one there. So those are the kind of projects that we take on where we can really impact things.
And I would think of it, the way that you think about it is it's a hand up, not a hand out.
Right.
And it's how do you change family trees? How do you give, and South Africa is a perfect example of it, because in South Africa is the only place where we have a continuity of care from 3 years old all the way up through getting jobs through college. There's a school there for little 3 to 5 year old preschool kids that are kids from the townships that are there. We actually help pay for kids to go to English speaking school for about 15 to 20 kids there. And then 14 of those kids to go into a leadership high school there, which is the only mixed gender, mixed race school in that area. And it's like it's just high quality as a U.S. private school. So we have 14 there. We seed funded a small college fund, and we just 2 years ago had our first student come from the township and graduate from college. And I got word today that we have 5 more that are graduating this week in South Africa as a result of that opportunity. So that continuity of care. And then when we go there, on a trip, the small kids, we've helped build the school. We essentially just make sure that our money's being used properly, play with the kids and have fun there. But when we go to that high school, we teach classes. We literally share our career trajectory. We give forecasts. Dave Finnegan from Orvis and myself, we taught about what the impact of AI and machine learning is going to be, how graphene can transform the world for things. He shared how they've got fishing rods with graphene now that have accelerometers in there, and you can benchmark yourselves on the fishing rod compared to the best fishermen in the world with doing things. So it's to spur on these things. I think Vicky's done a call. You've done a call down there, right, with the students? Did you not?
Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. And we taught marketing classes when we were in Honduras also.
Right.
There's one thing that I know we're going to probably talk about trips, but
I was going to go there
really
next. Yeah.
They are the heart of how we see what we can do and how we get our reward, kind of just seeing these things. But it's directly related to what Greg is talking about. So we've had the great fortune to take our children many of us have taken our children on these trips. And
Vicki, can you kind of describe for everyone how the trips take form? And when we say we talk about the RetailROI trips, what does that really mean?
So I'll use Honduras as an example. We have somebody in our kind of group that kind of is the leader for a particular country. And again, remember that we're working with on the ground charities. So they help us with the logistics. We don't have to figure a ton of this out ourselves, but we arrange to all get to the airport at about the same time. So flying from various and sundry places and across the U.S. And we try to get there around the same time. And we have transportation that gets us to our final destination. Many times the hotels that we stay at they're certainly absolutely fine and sometimes very nice. Greg had a very great experience with almost a resort. Yeah. And then we spend the time at wherever we are, whether it's, at the school or in my case in Honduras, this was the place with the 600 kids of various ages. And so our meals are handled, etc. And so again, you're working with a partner on the ground. So we always feel safe. And our children, we say, 13 is about the youngest, maybe 12, depending upon the child. But I started taking my son when he was 15, I believe. He's been on six trips, and my daughter's been on 2 or 3 trips. Just to dovetail what Greg talked about. So here we had a panel on the stage talking to technically the juniors and seniors about interviewing techniques. And we did role playing and we did some mock interviews and we talked about each person's business, whether it was SAP or Gartner or IGEL or whatever. We talked about the businesses and we talked about how they should be in a corporate environment and all of this. And I will tell you, because kids, all of you who have kids, don't listen to their parents, our kids got as much of an education as all of the children at that school. And I would honestly say that we've gotten tremendous benefit for our retail children who have listened to the people that are in our industry while they're in a foreign country. It's just one of those little side benefits. I think Jeff's
got lots of,
Yeah, I can't emphasize what Vicki just said more. Probably the single best amount of money I've ever spent in my life was taking my 2 twins to Honduras 4 times. I don't know, what was it? Probably 10, 12 grand for all 3 of us for those 4 times. they got a better business education than they probably did at the UC system that they both went through. I mean, when you think about, Vicki, when you think about what our kids heard in Honduras, when they heard, they got to hear business executives talk and they listened, but then they also got to see what happens, if things don't work well in a country. And so they just came back better people. They just flat out came back better people. And it was a great, great investment.
The most fun I have in Retail ROI is going on a trip where we take our teams and I get to watch my friends beam at the things that their teams are doing. We were the handing out the Tom shoes instead of buying the Tom shoes. And to watch the kids thrive and to watch the parents and the pride in their parents of watching their children give back was really, really special. When we do trips, we have some minor projects, but it's not like you would say with a church mission trip or somewhere, hey, we're going to go build something or we're going to do something. I mean, that's a waste of time for most of us. So some of us may have a skill set there, but what we do have is a lot of knowledge and a lot of networking. And so when we ask people to go on trips, if we've got our students with us, we got to keep them busy. But for the most part, for the adults in the industry, we want you to see the work. Just come experience the work, see the impact, because there's literally 30 things a day that we do and take for granted that we don't even think about because we're so proficient at it, that the charities we work in, it's a real struggle and they may not know how to do that. So most charities, for instance, they live month to month. Are we going to get enough money here to make it through the month? And then you bring somebody down and says, hey, what's your 5-year plan? Where would you like to be in 5 years? Let me walk you through that and put together a plan for how you can move forward and reach the goals you want to look for. Because most times you're too busy doing the work to think through the plan of how you might get there. And so that becomes really advantageous to them. So every trip we have a brainstorming session every single night at what we saw and how we can help and whose network we can tap in to help solve that issue. And that's where the real value comes in. It's not that we go build a building or, things there. Yes, we teach classes. Yes, we provide some things there, but the real value is when we come back after seeing the projects and put our networks and our knowledge together. John Geierman, the perfect example. John went down there, saw the kitchen situation, and he was vice president of Schlotzsky's franchise operations. He went back to Schlotzsky's and asked all the suppliers to donate the equipment. And he put $1 million kitchen into that school for about $65,000 total cost. But he didn't stop there because he was so touched by the kids that he was serving. He said, these kids can benefit through certification. So he took the food safety course of Schlotzsky's, translated it into Spanish, taught that class down there on a next trip, and then gave certification to the kids so they could go get jobs at hotels, etc. That was all his idea after being down there, seeing it and working it. And those are the kind of things that happen. Mark Haney, another one. He was installing Chromebooks with an SD card for us down in Dominican Republic. He said, there's a better way of doing this. And he came up with this concept of internet in a box using a Raspberry Pi. And now they've created their own charity called Control Alt Delete Poverty, which may be a geekier name than Retail ROI, but they have now put computer labs in 27 countries. And it's literally a carry-on bag that can provide first world education in 3 different languages anywhere in the world at a moment's notice, because it creates its own little Wi-Fi network, battery powered. And those are the kind of things that happen when people go on trips and say, there's a better way of doing this. And it's been so special to watch and be part of.
Yeah, that feels like in such an amazing process when you get the knowledge and skill sets from all the folks who are coming on the trip and you come up with all these new ideas. And the other thing I wanted to ask, so that one way from the trips, how else do you have retailers, and I shouldn't just say retailers because I know there's plenty of engagement from people throughout the industry, not just from retailers, but how do people get involved to begin with? What are the inroads how do you reach people and how do they first get involved typically?
Typically the first start for most people is the Super Saturday event. and simply coming to Super Saturday. For every retailer that attends Super Saturday, we generally can raise about $5,000 in sponsorship money from vendors. And that's usually the first step. Now, when you think about $5,000, what does that mean? Well, that means first world education for about 400 kids. That means clean water for a community of 500 by just attending the event. So that's the first step. The next thing is just joining your colleagues on a trip. And Jeff can attest to this. I'll let Jeff share this story, just the impact of the community that's built on the trip and the breakdown of barriers when it comes to business relationships as a result. It's a lot better than golf. So Jeff, you want to share your story with Lori about Lori and how when you were at Gartner, the challenges of getting her on a call?
Well, probably the most effective, in 20 plus years of being an analyst, probably the single most effective time I ever spent was those 2-hour bus rides in Honduras. And Vicky was on those. I mean, we literally had a who's who on that bus. And as an analyst, being trapped with leaders from all the software companies was just phenomenal. And so what was neat about that is, especially as an analyst, and the vendor analyst relationship can be kind of loving like a linebacker and a running back. But when you're actually working and sweating and out of your business attire, it was just phenomenal. I mean, it just was absolutely phenomenal. Now, that doesn't mean I pulled back on any of the analysis I would do with any vendor, but it's just nice to be able to have that sort of underlying relationship and it's really cool. I mean, it was really probably easily, I think, the best money I've ever spent. And I don't say that loosely. It just was a grand slam on every single level.
Jeff, you brought up a good point about the vendor community and supplier community in retail and how their participation is. And that's the side of the industry that I come from. And that's how I got involved with RetailROI. But this all makes sort of an open question for you, Jeff, Vicky, Greg, really for any of you. How do you engage with the vendor community on this? Apart from just, is it the sponsorship at the Super Saturday event that typically is what gets that part of the community engaged in supporting the charities? Or are there other things that happen based on your experience?
I would say there's two aspects of it. The reason that Greg talks about Super Saturday is just the exposure. Okay. It may be treated as a sponsorship, but what the real benefit is the content that happens that day and the exposure. The other thing where solution providers get involved is when people understand the need, okay, and let's say it happens to be a retailer and they're dealing with a project or see a need, they have an entire ecosystem of solution providers that they deal with in their everyday life, and they will reach out to them to get involved or to help. So those are, two ways that I would think. I'm sure Greg can add on to that.
Well, the vendors have also leveraged what they do for part of this. So we've had situations where people want to donate their cloud business for things. We've had an offer from a vendor before to handle the mobile devices. One of our charities has a strawberry business in Zambia. And, right now it's still a paper-based business with delivery drivers and other things, but to set up a, full-on accounting system, and that is just like you would have for any vendor here calling on your local Kroger or Walmart associated with that and offering their solutions that way. The other thing that is funding related is often incorporating RetailROI in their customer events when they've done things like for SAP, we did a food packing project. Jeff was involved in that one where they filled a container worth of protein rich meals for orphans and vulnerable kids in the afternoon instead of playing golf.
That was a fantastic event. Actually, that was Lori again, because she got so motivated from being in Honduras. She actually built that into, what was it? One of the SAP conferences. We literally took over a full
retail forum or something like that. Yeah,
something. It might have been bigger than that, Greg, but it was a big conference. And they brought in teams. And what happened was like SAP sales teams from regions would come in and would compete with each other. And, you've got a bunch of engineers in there. So these guys are all recreating the processes while they're filling, and there was hooting and hollering. I mean, it was probably the most fun I've had in a business event in an awful long time. It was, I don't know how many hundreds of boxes we produced, but it was a ton, and literally a ton, more than a ton.
I think it was close to 25,000 meals that you guys provided through that.
Wow. Wow.
So there's ways of just, I guess the point of ROI is just how do we do something impactful, but fun and support business? And I would argue, I'm sure more business was done inside that room than out in the golf course, because, salespeople would bring their clients and it just was a blast. We got, Dusty and all that stuff, but just a phenomenal thing. And there's probably 15 other examples where the other executives have adapted different processes inside their own business processes. And that's really the kind of the magic.
Yeah. And I can't overestimate or underestimate how valuable it is when a company joins a trip and says, you know what, we want to make this part of our core belief system for our company. And that's what happened with Aptos when they got involved. They started going to a variety of different places and decided, hey, we would really like to adopt the program with Lifesong in Haiti. And they've done, I think, 9 different trips now and helped build a school, a community center like this, which is like a hotel. I guess there's like a hotel type thing. They brought in people from Marriott to teach, hospitality training there. Then Verlin got involved when he was with Verizon and got satellite communications there. But the company is behind it and has made it part of everything that they do for customer events and continues to invest. And Parker Avery is now taking over Jamaica for us, which is really the next place where we plan on taking a lot of our youth, because we don't have the language barrier and we have a huge opportunity in the middle of Jamaica there. So it's a nice weekend trip, a long weekend where we can take our kids as well as other executives and really start to have an impact on a community, providing job opportunities, providing insight, training, et cetera.
Greg, let me ask you, with all the examples that everyone's brought up here today, how do you come across the different charities? Do they come to you? Do retailers, for example, who want to get involved say, Greg, I'm working with this charity and I think they'd be a great candidate for RetailROI? How does that happen?
Yeah, that has happened. And that's where we love to have that, where it's not all on Greg, Vicky, and Randy to pick the charity. So we've had several charities, like Jeff has been involved with Thierry with Senegal, and they created a charity to reach out there. But it's usually somebody who's passionately involved with the charity. So Gary Craig in Canada has been involved with a group called Sunrise Homes, and the actual work is in Myanmar, which obviously has been through a lot in the past year. But it's an orphan home in Myanmar, and that's the start, because they're personally involved with this charity. And I didn't know anything about it when it started, but we started with a very small project. We get the video back, we get the story back, we let Gary share about the impact, and then we decide whether or not we want to invest more into that. We've done that with some charities quite a bit because so many people have gone on trips with them that it's just kind of like a no-brainer. Same thing with like Free for Life International. John Geierman, that I mentioned earlier, got introduced to Free for Life through Super Saturday after doing that work in Honduras. And he's now chairman of the board of that charity. And they're the ones that did the rescue of over 1,500 women, I think now, and children on the border of Nepal and India as a result of that. So there are things that, where you bring the results back and say $10,000 helped rescue 1,500 women this year. That's no brainer to do things. The best way is that way. And then I've had others that I've just been fortunate as I've gone through my learning curve to say, man, this really has a huge return. So I'll give you an example of 2 here in the United States. One's called Safe Families. The other one is called Together for Good. What we found out through that process is over half the kids that go into foster care in the United States are not there because of neglect or abuse in any way. It just meant at a point of crisis, there was no safety net for the kids. That crisis could be escaping an abusive relationship. That could be drug abuse, short-term prison. And somebody that has an accident has to have a surgery and there's no safe place for the kids. And it's tragic. Once those kids go into the foster system, they not only cost $92,000 a year for that, the average time is 3 years in the system. So you're talking $270,000 there. Well, if that happens to you or me, we usually have family members or somebody else that can watch our children. So what Safe Families and Together for Good is, they basically provide that safety net for that short-term care. So a family steps up and said, you know what, I'll watch these children for 45 days, 60 days. Mom and dad still have legal responsibility for them. But in this point of crisis, we're going to come alongside and be that safety net for this family. And that costs about $1,000 per family. So that $1,000 covers all the things related to social workers, transportation, medical care, all that stuff for the children. That saves a family, saves the government $270,000 on average for $1,000. So we look at that ROI and say, that makes sense to do. So we've had over 22,000 kids now, 22,000 families that have been preserved through those programs as a result of this. And so those are things that, through my education, I just personally found and said, this makes sense for what we're doing. And this needs to increase because it has a big societal impact.
One of the things that I've always been both surprised and impressed with when I listen to all the different charities at Super Saturday is how effective what seems on the surface like a relatively small amount of funding, but the amount of impact that can have. One example I always remember, because it was, I think, one of the first ones that got involved in that first year that we sponsored Super Saturday, Greg, and it was with the More Than Me in Liberia.
Yeah.
And I think this was when they, through some of the sponsorship dollars, right, they bought the first ambulance in that area. Yep. I remember you telling me afterwards that the impact was, and this for everyone listening was during the Ebola crisis at that time.
Right.
And if you remember when the year the Time magazine labeled the Ebola warriors their person of the year, it was that time frame. And I remember you telling me the impact of the ambulance meant that doctors' visits in that town went from what otherwise could take a day's trip just to get to a
4
patient.
days.
4 days. 4 days. But it went down to like 45 minutes.
Right.
Which is just with such a massive impact.
Yeah. With Ebola, first day you feel like you got the cold or the flu. Second day, it gets a little more serious, but it still feels like malaria or the flu, things that you don't really have. But the third day is when the really bad stuff happens. And by day 4, you're dead. So when you can imagine that in the largest slum in Liberia, which is an area about the size of your normal large mall in the United States, and 100,000 people live there, Ebola is in the middle of it. And if you touch a person that's infected with Ebola, you get Ebola. And that's how many people are in that area. And it was taking 4 days for an ambulance to come. And so when Katie, when she asked me for money for an ambulance, it was pretty much a no-brainer for me. And so, and here was the other part. There were only 4 ambulances in the entire country, which is the size of New Jersey.
Yeah.
So you can imagine how tough that would be. But yeah, they were able to get the call rate down to less than an hour.
Yeah, that was just an amazing impact for what ultimately is not that great a spend, right? Just to pay for that ambulance compared to what I think the expectation that a lot of people probably have before they learn about what you're doing and what all the charities are doing is that, how can I raise enough money to have an impact? And I think the biggest takeaway from all the work RetailROI does is that any amount can be put to good use.
Yeah. That's an example. Yeah. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that's an example where all we did was provide money, period. And it had that impact. Go ahead.
Let's talk about the money for a minute, because as we all reach a point in our lives where we really feel like we want to be doing more and giving back. And I remember when it felt that way. And there's always this strange feeling when you hit that point in your life of, well, how can I make an impact? Yes, I could write a check to something, but it didn't have... It didn't feel like it was something I was connected to, because you really do want to make an impact beyond being able to donate. And so I have learned 100 times over that and you think whatever I as a single person would do is not going to have enough of an impact. And what I've learned and seen 100 times is all you have to do is impact one person, literally one person. Because that person gets such a benefit. It is such a circle of it just ripples out from there. You help one person, they got a leg up, or if you meant something to them at that moment in their life, they help somebody else, they help somebody else. Your impact is astounding just by helping one person. And we help a lot of people, and we help a lot of, just the interaction of listening to these kids' stories and sponsoring them, which is minimal money impact, but it makes a huge difference to their life. So you will make a huge difference with just the smallest amount of effort because of the ripple effect that you will create.
Yeah, and so I'll give you I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Greg.
I give you one example with a real life person. When we went in 2016 to Liberia, we met a young lady named Grace who was going into the 12th grade. And this is prior to Mark creating these Raspberry Pi computer labs. She was in the 11th grade. She lost both of her parents to Ebola, and she got placed in this orphanage. And she had potential. And we gave her a Chromebook, a $250 Chromebook. And she not only graduated from high school, she went on to graduate college and is now a school teacher because we were able to give her a Chromebook with Khan Academy to help her learn and finish her education for $250.
Oh, it's fantastic. I remember at each year at each Super Saturday event, you've always got at least one of those stories of how that impact has affected that one person. They've been on stage at Super Saturday and told their story, from everything about their story, from where the low point was to how everything's changed for them once these, what you might otherwise think are very small impacts, but they have such a major change in someone's life when it happens. I think these are just amazing stories.
Yeah, we have a special reprised edition of a young man named Demetrius Napolitano.
Yeah.
Demetrius is coming back to share an update on his life. And for the listeners here, Demetrius is a young man who grew up in 32 different foster homes in Harlem growing up. And he had one social worker that believed in him. He should have been a statistic. He should have been dead. And he was on that path. And that social worker believed in him. And he has since graduated from NYU. He was an intern in Congress there. He got to work for the Robin Hood Foundation in New York City with John Paul Tudor Jones. And he's now impacting youth in his region there. But I don't want to give the whole story, but he's an amazing young man who happened to get adopted when he was 24 by a 32-year-old couple there. And then so now he has the name Demetrius Napolitano. So he's a young black man that looks like Eddie Murphy with an Italian last name. And it's a really special story. And we're going to be catching up with him at Super Saturday.
That's fantastic. It's fantastic. So, Greg and Vicky, let me ask you, we've kind of talked about how some of the retailers get involved. We talked about how solution providers in retail have helped both from their sponsorship and resources. How do other people, let's broaden kind of the retail ecosystem, if you will, and how do other people get involved? Maybe they're not a retailer. They may not work for a tech company providing retail solutions, but would one get involved with RetailROI?
Well, like I said, coming to Super Saturday, being a part of that. We also have a fundraiser each year related to the March Madness. We call it March Gladness, where we do small things where people donate gift cards that we have as prizes, and we play brackets. And so we built a school in Haiti that by playing brackets and winning prizes. So that's a real simple way. Broader than that is just joining a trip. Get involved, join a trip. I will tell you one way you can impact, and it has nothing to do with RetailROI, but has an amazing impact. Go to our YouTube channel, RetailROI YouTube channel, and look up Nicole Taylor and the Socialite program that is right in your community. What Nicole found out is that social workers are some of the people with the highest turnover in the country because of the burnout and the emotional impact of that. What they found is children that go into the foster care system, if they have one social worker, 74% of the time they find permanence and find a family to live in, 74% of the time. When that social worker changes, it's only 26% of the time. So they created a program called Socialite, which was just adopting a social worker, encouraging a social worker, providing a gift card, a note of thank you, flowers on their birthday, inviting them to lunch, and just telling them that they mattered. In their one county, they dropped the turnover rate from 69% to 29% in 1 year, just by people being appreciated for what they do. And that's something we can do in every one of our communities, is find out from our local foster care, can we get a list of folks and leverage our networks in our area. Maybe it's your community of faith that wants to come and be a part of that. But just adopting those folks, encouraging those folks, telling them that they matter, they're making a difference, and that has such a dramatic impact on the potential for children that they serve. It's hard to quantify it because it's so impactful.
Yeah, that one is just amazing to me. The level of impact and effect it can have just by doing something so simple, right? To just thank someone for what they're doing.
Right. And there's a saying in this foster care adopted community is not everybody's called to adopt. Not every person is called to be a foster care, but we can all do something to assist. That can be respite care for an adopted family. That can be just providing a dinner there, providing a night out for a foster family, but just coming alongside of those folks in that community to make a difference.
So one question for you, given the different charities you're working with today, are there any of those that maybe we haven't touched on yet that you want to highlight that maybe anybody listening or someone that catches on the replay might want to get involved with?
Well, gosh, I don't want to pick favorites there. I've mentioned several. I think there's opportunities with Control-Alt-Delete Poverty if you want to sponsor a computer lab and First World Education. There's one called the Fergus Simpson Foundation that we're working with in Jamaica that is really a grassroots just getting started there, but an opportunity to completely impact the community of Chapelton in Jamaica with job opportunities and with, one of the things that happens is that you give a man a fish versus teach a man to fish. Well, what happens if there's no pond? And that's what we're doing, is helping create a pond in that part of Jamaica. I will give you actually one. It's a for-profit company that I think retailers and anybody on this call may be interested in. And there's a group called TideRise. If you look up TideRise, I think it's tiderise.co, but look it up. Behind it is the organization that created the app called Flip, that is digitizes retail circulars so you can see deals. The CEO of that company went to Malawi and was working with an orphanage and came up with that same problem. If there's no pond, how do you teach a man to fish? So they created a technology business incubator there that cleans data for artificial intelligence. And they took their lead sales guy for Flip, and he's now leading this organization, and they're looking for projects from retailers and companies that want to have clean data and tag data for artificial intelligence. And that's what the folks there do in this community now. And it's building up jobs in that community as a result. So TideRise, Fergus Simpson Foundation, Control-Alt-Delete Poverty are some of those.
There's also Casita Copan in Honduras, which is a different place than we used to go there. And they have been able to purchase a big section of property very recently in the last 6 months. And so they are going to be able to serve many more kids and have them have a family environment. And so that's another kind of enclosed thing that people can really see the impact of their involvement.
And one last one comes to mind for impact in the United States as well as Dominican Republic. The Thrive and Joy, Nick Fagnano Foundation, was started by Mary Fagnano, who used to be with Chain Store Age magazine. Jay and Mary tragically lost their son, Nick, when he was 19 years old by a freak lightning strike in Southern California. He was washing his feet off in the ocean and got struck by lightning. We encouraged him. He had a passion for Dominican Republic for some reason. And they started going down there, and that's become a life mission for them. They started a US-based version called C11 that's underneath them, which is 11 character traits. And they're teaching them in public high schools here in the United States. And it's become clubs. So just like you have the singing club and the chess club or the Fellowship of Christian Athletes or whatever, they now have a club called C11 that's now in the LA County schools, where the kids meet with Jan Mary and other folks that become leaders to teach character qualities that they may not be getting at home or at school. And they're about 2 years into that one. So that's a charity as well that I would encourage people to get involved with.
All of those are absolutely wonderful ones. Thanks for sharing all of those, Greg. Before we close out the room, as we're coming to the top of the hour here, any last thing you want to mention about the upcoming Super Saturday event?
Well, it's the Saturday before NRF, January 15th. It's going to be right in Times Square. You can find out more information, the agenda, at retailroi.org, and there'll be a link right on the homepage there. We have former special agents of the FBI sharing the latest ransomware techniques and things coming in, and sharing how to protect yourself and your family and your companies as a result of that. We have Andy Lodato is going to talk about his new book and to share some things on how to build a world-class IT organization and how to build innovation even during a point of crisis. And then we're going to share our latest data from consumer studies, what's going on with all these digital journeys, and then finally our annual store study that we do with RS News. So that's all part of the content that day. And then you get to meet a lot of the charities right there.
This is always the best event during NRF week.
Thank you.
Vicki, any final comments you want to share just in general about ROI or about Super Saturday or how everyone can support?
No, I think that we covered all the different aspects. Again, there is no substitute for seeing it, feeling it. We always say, and it's true in Super Saturday too, a little bit, but when you go on a trip, you experience everything with all five senses. And that's what really makes the impact.
Wonderful. I know I haven't been fortunate enough to go on one of the trips, but I hope that at some point I'll have a chance to do that. But I always make a point of getting Super Saturday on my agenda because I wouldn't miss that for anything, both for the content and just to learn about what all the charities are doing and do anything I can to help with that. Jeff, any final thoughts from you?
Gosh, it's just such an amazing thing when you can put your business skills to work. I think we've said it again and again and again. When you get into Senegal or Congo or Honduras, any of the places I've been, it doesn't take much. It's just anybody that's an assistant manager, 22-year-old assistant manager in a store can just crush it when you go into emerging economies. Our skills, our ability to schedule, or just absorb information, those are all just the skills they're all crying for. And by the way, a lot of the charities could use that skill just as much. Gosh, the charities folks are, their heart's 2 sizes too big, but sometimes their business experience is 2 sizes too small. And that is a perfect match for what any retailer can do. It's really, really worth the effort. Take your kids, get them involved. You'll never regret it. It's just a huge, huge opportunity that you think you're doing good. And guess what? You end up getting more than you'll ever give. Guarantee it that.
That's a great point. Great point. So I think on that note, we will go ahead and close out the room. I know I recognize a lot of names down there and a lot of great supporters for Retail ROI. And I hope to see some of you at Super Saturday. And thanks everyone for joining us. I want to thank Greg, Vicki. It's been wonderful hearing all the stories today. I always enjoy talking about Retail ROI and trying to find new ways to support all the great work that's being done. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, you.
Ricardo.
And we hope to see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. We hope that was as memorable and inspiring a session for all of you as it was for us.
I think it's important for us to remember how much of our supply chains and network can be leveraged for more than clothes. How did you first get involved with Retail ROI, Ricardo?
So it was our good friend of the show, Jeff Roster, who introduced me to ROI. We were at a retail conference back in, I want to say it was probably 2015. Yeah, probably 2015. I was talking with Jeff, and one of the retailers at the conference came up and started asking him about an upcoming Retail ROI activity. So I asked Jeff what he was talking about because it was completely new to me. Jeff talked about one of the projects he was involved in. I think it was in Honduras at the time, which I think Greg mentioned that one. during the clubhouse session with the kids at that school there. And Jeff, at that time, it turns out, was looking for someone who could get in a webinar with the kids in the school and just talk about career paths in business and technology. It turns out his challenge was that he didn't speak Spanish, so he couldn't lead that session and was looking for help. So as he was explaining that, I said, well, Jeff, you know what? I can do that in Spanish for you. You want me to join with you? Happy to do it. So he was really excited, and we set that up a couple of weeks later. I think I talked to the kids for about an hour in the school. It was great. I can see how all this really worked together with all the things that Vicky talked about and that project and all the things, examples Greg mentioned. And after that, Jeff told me a little bit more about what Super Saturday was like and actually introduced me to Greg, who I hadn't met yet at that point. So I made sure the company I was with at the time became a sponsor of that following Super Saturday. And turns out that was the project mentioned in the replay where the sponsorship helped buy the ambulance in Liberia that made such a difference on making the response time go from, 4 days down to less than an hour in the middle of the Ebola crisis. I mean, just unbelievable. So it was a huge deal. And that organization's founder, the More Than Me organization, when she spoke at that Super Saturday, and she started talking about her history, how she created the charity, and what they were doing in Liberia, it was one of those sample moments. I think they mentioned it in the replay. Just everyone sitting in the audience, it's passing around the tissue box because the story was just so heart-wrenching and so unbelievable that we could actually see the people are telling us where they'd been, how they got there, what they were doing now, and how the organization worked. It was just so unbelievable what they were accomplishing. It really was a magical experience. So that's how I first started working with RetailROI. It's been over 10 years now.
Wow. Yeah, it is practically magic. And I mean, we're really a family when it comes to retail. No matter where we work, our paths always cross.
Yeah.
So we should definitely be kicking off NRF with Super Saturday and remain in constant collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, it is so absolutely the best way to get NRF started. I mean, you're 100% right. And it really does show no matter how big an industry this becomes, it really ends up being such a small community. Now, when you look at the people that are involved and you're in retail long enough, everybody knows each other at the end of the day. So Super Saturday is just such a great way to do that. So again, for any of the retailers listening to this episode, now is the time to go and register and attend and show your support.
And if you're on the vendor side of the community and you've heard this story and you're saying to yourself, wow, how do I get involved? Of course, you have heard Greg and Vicky talk about in the replay, but just go to the RetailROI website. You'll find the link in the show notes. It's the perfect time to sign up and become a sponsor.
Yeah, I'm excited for this next Super Saturday. I really can't wait.
Me too. So, Ricardo, something tells me, and it's not the fact that we've made it this extra long of an episode, but it's time to call this episode a wrap.
Yes, indeed, it is that time.
So if you enjoyed our show, we have a simple ask. Please consider giving us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Good Pods. Remember to smash that subscribe button in your favorite podcast player. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a minute. As always, a huge thank you to our amazing Good Pods listeners for helping us consistently rise to the top 3 spots in the indie management and indie marketing weekly and monthly podcast charts with every episode. I'm Casey Golden.
Please follow us and share your feedback at Retail Razor on LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Threads, and Instagram. And if you want preview highlights and transcripts from each episode in your email inbox, please subscribe to our Substack newsletter. The Retail Razor Show is the original show in the Retail Razor Podcast Network. I'm Ricardo Belmar.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time, stay sharp, stay human, and stay ahead. This is the Retail Razor Show.